All right, classes in session of part two. Just covered part one, how women contribute to societal collapse. Solid Ground podcast number 138, featuring guest Dr. Danny Sulikowski. Go subscribe to the Solid Ground podcast. Dr. Danny Sulikowski did several podcasts, and she talked about, this is her groundbreaking work, I guess, on the societal collapse and how women are contributing to that societal collapse. So there's other podcasts on YouTube. You can find her. Just search Dr. Danny Sulikowski and hear her several podcasts she did on this.
Lots of other women then have to follow them, because we know that one thing that women are incredibly motivated to do is to follow the social norms set by them. That's why women are so much more susceptible.
Females follow the group. Females are so much more susceptible to group pressure.
Contagions than young men are. Women are incredibly strongly motivated to follow the social trends. And so
females follow social trends. That's why they need good leaders and daddy instead of their female counterparts. That's why, girls trips, single girls trips, all that, single women keep women single. They're very susceptible to the group because it's a feature, not a bug. They had to survive. We don't put a bad name on that. Just know the animal you're dealing with. They need to know themselves too.
The influential women are able to set social trends that just impose attractiveness costs on everybody else, and they wear those.
Influential women impose basically attractive costs on other women, usually lower in status.
Themselves, but they can afford to, right? A woman who's highly attractive, with a gorgeous body and a gorgeous face, can afford to shave her head. She's still going to be, very highly attractive. A woman who doesn't have a lot going for her, physically speaking, who then also shaves her head, is also going to look a lot less feminine and bear a much bigger cost for following that particular fashion trend. That's also why we see so many. You might sort of intrinsically think that if fashion was driven by intersexual competition, then fashion would be flattering. And that's why we see so many clothes that come into fashion not being flattering, because that's actually the point of it. That the point is to actually impose a cost on other women to have to keep up with these fashion trends.
But it feels like
they're clothes that are difficult for.
Okay, now you're finally going to hear the one on the top left, top left. Now she's going to give her 2 cents, and none of them have liked, I don't think, anything she said. Here we go.
Able to wear if they don't have a perfect figure.
it feels it feels different when you're doing, I specifically related to online dating, for example, when you're building a profile.
Online dating. Why would you do online? I thought no one did online dating. Oh, you do online dating too? I see a lot of women doing because you love men. Well, you're going to have to stop doing that online dating, ladies.
I mean, it seems.
So she's talking about women building a profile.
So the most attractive photos that you have of yourself and the most attractive photos of what you're wearing of yourself, having a good time, all these things that add to your attractiveness.
So she thinks that men care about them having a good time and showing them with their friends and showing them having wine and then showing them at work and then showing them in all these different, kind of scenes and lifestyle. She thinks that men care about those like she cares about those, right? Women want to see men maybe on the sports field and then man in a suit and then man with his friends, because that's what women like. That behavior shows the overall lifestyle of the man. But me as men on online dating, they care if you're going to have sex quickly. So here's where women, this is the blind spot. Watch her get this wrong.
It's the hair and makeup and clothing, and it's the hanging out with, people and friends, and it's the showing of the hobbies that you enjoy. All of those things contribute to the.
Do you think men care about your hobbies before they banged you? No. And she's going to explain it. Men, you're not bad because you don't care about her hobbies or anything she has to say before you bang her.
Attractiveness, and
that's what she cares about. That's her blind spot.
Those women that are getting the most attention online with online dating.
Watch
it's not the woman who's a little heavier and kind of.
Watch her like snipe this and tell her she's wrong.
Doesn't dress as well. Maybe she's a little more plain to look at. Maybe she's a little more frumpy to look at. So it feels like there's a discrepancy when it comes to something like that. And I'm just sort of speaking anecdotally. I don't have any statistics on this from women who I know that have done the
Yeah, you're talking about all your friends who are telling you wrong things to win. You're all in a competition and your friends are telling you the wrong things.
dating thing, who kind of vary from very attractive and gorgeous, almost model looking like women, all the way down to people that,
Yes, but if the frumpy girl's ready to bang, men are going to go with the frumpy girl, is what she's going to say. Men want to know who's ready to bang. If your hot friends want to go on 20 dates, men ain't going to do that. They want to bang.
you know, are just average, and who is attracting the most male attention, who isn't. And so it just feels like there's a discrepancy there. So I'm just curious about your thoughts about
So-
that.
There is a discrepancy there, but it has a few interesting explanations. So the thing to remember there's a couple of things to remember about online dating, and that is that the men on online platforms tend to be higher in what we call like the dark triad of
Men on online dating tend to be higher than dark triad, meaning Machiavellianism, narcissism, and sociopathy.
so they tend to be more psychopathic, more narcissistic, and more Machiavellian. And the women who are on those platforms tend to be higher in neuroticism and anxiety
Neuroticism and anxiety for the women.
than women in the general population. So when you're looking at what's happening on those online dating platforms, you've got to imagine sort of, what will happen if, nastier than average men come up
Nastier than average men. I guess I'm nastier than average men when I did it.
more neurotic than average women. And so what a lot of the men on those dating platforms, and obviously this isn't, clearly isn't true for all men. I'm sure there are plenty of men out on those platforms who are looking, for genuine relationships. What a lot of the men on those platforms are looking for is they're simply looking to have sex. And
Correct. Most men on online dating, and I think in general, but on online dating are looking to have sex. It doesn't make anyone bad, but it does make women that are trying to get dates on there frustrated.
what they're looking for in the pictures is not necessarily how attractive
What they're looking for in the women's pictures is not how attractive they are, but how quick they are to bang.
is. What they're looking for is indicators of how likely they think they will be to be able to have sex with her with
Boom.
relatively little investment from them. Of course, they don't have to date her for several months to be able to have sex. Right?
Correct.
That's a lot of investment. What they're looking for,
It's a lot of investment to have to date for several months.
who do they think based on photos, appearance, hobbies, and what they say
Who
about
do they think from the profile is ready to bang?
themselves is going to be more
Oh, look, she's hanging out with friends and has wine and wants to travel and then wants to build and is a creature of God and wants to have adventures and go to live music and to go dancing. And you ain't ready to bang.
to effectively have sex with them. And what you find is because a lot of the women on these platforms are higher than average in sort of neuroticism and anxiety, a lot of the women on these platforms are going to have sex with these men because they're quite desperate to find a partner, and so they will kind of
Women are desperate to have a partner, so they'll bang quickly. Oh, Lord.
be, willing to lower the market price of sex, if you like, to attempt to
So women have lowered the market price of sex to hookups. Who lowered the market price? Women.
these men. And so you end up with these dating
So the neurotic, anxiety-induced women are sleeping with Machiavellian, sociopathic, narcissistic men to win favor, which then they have taken down the price tag of sex because now it's just come on over and bang, which most women are doing, and men are like, hey, this other lady don't make me do that, so now the price tag for sex is hookup.
happening with that kind of a phenomenon. So what the men are choosing is not necessarily the women that are more attractive, but where women are wearing makeup and sexy clothing and fancy hair and all dolled up, and that's giving a signal out to other women that, stay out of my way, I'm on the hunt, I'm not someone that you would like to mess with at this point in time. Well, men also see those signals and go, aha, that's someone who is wanting to portray that she is out on the hunt. And so that's why they're more likely to go for those types of photos on the dating sites. If you ask men, and this research has been done to death now, it's pretty clear.
This research has been done to death, and it's pretty clear, meaning it's no longer argumentative.
If you ask men to be choosing women as partners women as prospective long-term partners, they're more likely to find attractive the women you described as not getting as much action on the dating websites. The women that dress much more conservatively, much more plainly, don't decide to choose a picture of themselves with a wine in their hand and, half-drunk friends all around them in the pub as their profile picture, that kind of thing, right? So they're the women that men would be more interested in for an actual long-term liaison, but the fact is that in spite of what they might tick in their profile for what they're looking for, there is, the majority of men on those platforms are looking for short-term liaisons, and they are choosing women who they think that
Men are on those platforms are normally looking for short-term liaisons, and they're choosing women that look like they are in for short-term liaisons. There's the problem with online dating in a pinch right there.
To get those from. And if these men have been on there for a while, then they're just going to learn through trial and error whether they understand.
Men are going to know who's ready to bang, and men are going to know who's not. So that's why they ask certain things and look for clues.
Behind it or not, they're going to learn pretty quickly through trial and error what kind of profiles work when you try to hit these women up for sex and which profiles say no to you. So they learn pretty quickly which women to swipe left on and which ones to swipe right on, even if they have no idea of the psychology behind that.
Facts.
They're just going to learn. So that's kind of what's happening on dating sites. It's important to remember that it's not just that it's not representative, but the fact that it's not representative means that the entire dynamic on those sites is quite different to what you would then see out in the real world. So
the dynamic on online dating sites is quite different than what you see in real world. I think dating apps are dying for this reason, and I think real world's the way to go. Yes, it's a little harder, but it is the way to go, I believe. That's why they're all about 90% less than they were a couple years ago. They've all lost about 9% in value.
It's not just the people that's different, but by having different people, it creates an entirely different, because it's a game, right? The behavior of one group impacts the behavior of the other group and impacts the payoff matrix for the other group. So the whole dynamic of how how men and women on dating sites interact differs quite a bit from how men and women then interact in the real world. Obviously, there's similarities and there's corollaries, but it's not really quite the same.
So I have another question for you, Danny, about the overall structure of this. So you point out that there's a lot of women in powerful, supportive bureaucratic roles.
Yeah.
Where a lot of influence is being.
Yes, women in high positions of government that have power are writing the social narratives. Yes.
But we don't have a female Bill Gates out there trying to reduce the world population. We haven't seen a lot of female forefront to this population, reproductive suppression movement. We usually see men at the head of that. We see men at the head of.
She's claiming that men are at the head of birth rate suppression. Sorry, but this is going to be proven false again.
Justin Trudeau, or you see male leaders in positions where these things are being put forward. And so if women have, and if men and women have different evolutionary strategies available to them, women, like you said, they're not going to go and deck somebody usually, because that's not the strategy that wins. So from an evolutionary perspective, would it be fair to say that women would tend to be the strongest sort of supporters of whatever the power structure that is existing would be? So they would be it's almost a sycophantic role of, I will support the current thing. I support the current thing. I align myself with whatever's in power right now. And so you would see this army of bureaucrats that's that's basically parroting the main message that's being sent. So if the main message is population control, then that would be the message that you would hear through the women, but it's not necessarily a female origin of this particular thing.
I'm not sure that there's very good evidence that women are more likely to support the status quo.
That was
So-
something that Dr. Eric Kaufman talks about, and I would love to get a conversation with the two of you and hear your ideas
Yes.
about
So
that.
she's probably got the wrong information. She's trying to snipe a study to make this true, and it's not true.
I think at the moment with the far left, the far left that we're seeing women supporting the status quo, right? So, but that's because it's the progressive status quo.
He's
So
made the
when-
same argument for when conservative is the status quo, that you see women in terms of like temperance or other things, other big conservative movements. You've seen a lot of women at the forefront of that.
Does he have specific examples? Because sort of a lot of the examples of progressive, progressive protest and whatnot also features women very heavily. So, for reasons that align with
Progressive protests fetch women.
strategy, but women were at the forefront of the sexual revolution, for example. It was female behaviour it's female behaviour that controls the market price of sex. So it's predominantly always going to, by definition, have to be female.
Female behavior controls the market price of sex, meaning if you're seeing a hookup culture, that means women that are banging quickly have established that cost or that price. If females together in a group say that it's 10 dates, it's 10 dates. But now everyone says we're in hookup culture. Well, females allowing hookups to exist have established the market price of sex to hook up.
That brings about a sexual revolution. So maybe that's sort of, it's kind of wasn't really an option there to be there for the men. But I think it's the women who are certainly enforcing the more progressive side of things. But I'm not quite sure that there's as much evidence that women would necessarily just support whatever the status quo is. I mean certainly at the moment, there's a huge divide in political orientation between men and women, right? So women are much more left-wing than men at the moment, and that's not always been there. That's, as politics becomes more and more progressive, it is, the divide between men and women is becoming much larger in terms of their mean political orientation.
But politics
Such
has
that-
also become more salient in terms of social identity.
Compared to when? Like, what do you mean
Just
by
compared to in my lifetime, even, we see the polarization increasing quite a bit between left and right.
Big deal, but in her lifetime. But right now, women, the divide between men and women are conservatives, women are progressives. That's not for argument. But she wants to make it a different argument.
So it's more of a language that people use in order to sort of idiomatically express their discontent. We go into the language of politics right away. In the 90s, it wouldn't have been as common.
It doesn't matter about how polarized we are. It matters who is on which side of the argument. Women are on the left, men are on the right.
Up to somebody and immediately, accuse them of voting for the wrong guy or, things like this. So we have this way that we are channeling a lot of our social angst through this political sphere and political language. So it's kind of unique in that regard.
That's true, but I'm not sure that's sort of fundamentally different from just observing that there has become a massive sort of shift between the sexes, between being more progressive and being more conservative. So it's clear that whatever the cause of it might be, it's clear that we have a shift in political alignment.
Yes, it doesn't matter what the cause is. Could be social media, what they all like to say. But we have shifted. Men are conservative, women are liberal, what she's saying.
Been playing out over recent decades, right? That's clear whatever's causing it. And so I think, the observation that politics is becoming much more salient, I don't necessarily think that that's either either necessarily a cause or effect. I mean, I think it's something that just goes along with that shift, but I don't think it replaces an explanation for why that shift is occurring. I don't think the shift is occurring just because people are starting to pay more attention from politics. I mean, if anything, I think it would be more likely to be the opposite. You have this massive divide, and then you start having problems and whatever with it. But I think the key question though is, why are we having this massive political divide? Why is it that the political interests of women are deviating more and more from the political interests of men?
I have a question.
Oh, she's not playing with her camera anymore. What's the?
What specific aspects of female psych?
We want specifics again. Here we go. This is try to pin you down and debunk the argument. Oh, you don't have specifics. You must be wrong.
Drives civilizational collapse, do you think?
So the explanation for it that I have, and it's less about aspects of female psychology and more about we've got aspects of female psychology, but the fundamental driver of it is the genetic payout of being there at the end. So when civilizations collapse, rarely, if ever, do you get to a point where the population disappears. For the most part, what civilizational decline and collapse means is that the population gets shrunk, the population gets invaded, and the population then grows again. So if you're part of a large population, your lineages will be, some small proportion of that population along with everybody else. If the population gets driven down to a very small bottleneck and you are one of very few lineages that exist in that bottleneck, and then the population explodes from that, then your representation in the population goes from being a minority to being majority. And that is the genetic prize that drives the behavior. And it doesn't just benefit women, which is why I think that what you were mentioning earlier, Leslie, about male and female behavior dovetailing together to bring the collapse down. That is what's happening, because it isn't just women, of course, who benefit.
Men and women are trying to bring the birth rates down.
Every single human.
Because in the end, they'll pay off when it'll shrink, and then it'll get down to a certain spot, and then it'll explode again.
Is the offspring of both a man and a woman. So it is the female behavior primarily, again, because women control the reproductive output. If the reproductive output is going to increase or decrease, it has to be female behavior that changes to do that, right? Men are largely superfluous as far as reproduction goes, right? Women are the rate limiters of reproduction. Women can increase the reproductive rate, and women have much more power to lower the reproductive rate than men do. So it's going to have to be a thing that is, in that regard, in terms of population decline, it's going to have to be very heavily driven by women. But if we were seeing an evolutionary system in which, there was this sort of intersexual competition playing out where women are suppressing each other's reproductive success as part of competitive strategies, and that was having a negative impact on the society, which was effectively not coming with a genetic reward at the end of it, then we would expect men to be very strongly selected for to interfere in that and to intervene in that. And instead, we're not seeing men as a group intervening. We're seeing men actually going right along with it. Men are qualitatively lowering their levels, facultatively lowering their levels of testosterone. Men are behaving less violently.
Men are lowering their rates of testosterone. I don't think you should do that. TRT, go check with your doctor.
Are coming out and as more and more feminine and more effeminate.
And women don't like that. That's a way to win in this new dating market, become more masculine. Women always love the masculine.
Much less masculine. Men are supporting women in the workplace. Men are supporting abortion. Men are supporting women not having families. Men are going along with the strategy.
Yes, without the white knights, you will not have, women would not have as much power.
Are the vast majority of women. So what we're seeing is a whole civilizational change in behavior that is driving the civilization down into the ground. Now, if this was a one-off, if this was something that was happening that we hadn't seen happen before, then perhaps the most parsimonious explanation would be, well, look, the world has changed a heck of a lot in a very short period of time. We have technologies we didn't have before. We have a level of global communication we didn't have before. Maybe something really bad is happening that hasn't happened before, but this has happened before, and a lot of the same markers that we point to.
So the societal collapse that we're in is not only, technology. These same markers that they're seeing now are very common. These have happened in other societal collapses.
That I now point to as sort of, direct flow on consequences of women spending less time in the home rearing children and having families, and spending more time in civic duties and in workplaces, and not just spending time in those areas so that they're not spending time having children, but spending time in those areas promoting policies and the social agenda that creates a society that is very hostile to reproduction. That's what women are doing in these institutions, and those institutions don't behave, even though the men who are in there cooperate with what the women are doing. When those institutions are dominated by men, they don't do that. They don't create an environment that's hostile to reproduction. So you need to have a certain like a threshold representation of women in these institutions before you start to see them becoming hostile to reproduction.
I'm sorry to jump in. I feel like I have so many questions for you, and this is such a fascinating conversation. I feel like we could go in lots and lots of different directions. I wish we had 3 hours to spend together. I've been reading Mary Harrington's Feminism Against Progress, and I find her arguments and her logic about this very compelling, very interesting. She kind of breaks this down into how feminism has emerged in the post-industrial era as a response to the way that our lives changed so dramatically, men and women's lives post-industrialization. And women, and I'm going to totally butcher her argument, so I'm not trying to really represent it properly, but she kind of sees this bifurcation in the feminist movement between those who would like to assume male jobs and do things that have been a part of the male role, and those who would like to have more respect for female role. And one of the things that she talks about in terms of the allure of maybe the marketplace outside of the home, economic engagement outside of the home for women, is that women never were in the home. That's a fiction to think that women used to just be in the home. That's a very specific, like very Victorian, upper class, privileged kind of opportunity to be in the home. Women would have been in the fields, and they would have been working labor with other women and in big groups of people while tending their children in large social groups. And so this new era where you can either go out and work in some job outside of your house, or you can be isolated in your home with your children, is a really unnatural thing, and it creates a lot of pressures and stresses for people. And so what we've done is we've really taken the human animal and pulled it out of its normal environment and expected it to perform. And so now we have all these responses to this. So part of that, I guess that statement right there could launch like another hour of discussion, because I'd love to hear all of your responses to it. And I don't know, do you guys have like another 10 minutes to go a little bit longer? Because I also know Jennifer and Christine might have other thoughts. So let me defer over to Jennifer and Christine. If you guys have any other thoughts or questions that you want to bounce around, we'll see if Danny can engage with those, and we'll save mine, and maybe we'll have a chance to talk about it another time. But Jennifer?
Yeah, I don't know if I can state this in a way that makes any sense, but I'll give it a go.
Yeah.
So, I very much grew up with, the advice that I should focus on getting an education and having my career and making sure that I was never financially dependent on a man. Yes, have kids, but 100% set yourself up first. I feel like that advice was coming from a good place. And that place was, hey, we've seen a lot of women in terrible marriages that are having a very difficult time leaving due to their economic dependence. And so that I feel like that advice was given in good conscience. And but I also see that advice has had some ill effects. And that people are sometimes, a lot of people now are putting off childbirth until where now they need IVF.
She has dogs, doesn't have kids.
So that was just created a whole industry, but also a lot of problems for people, and a lot of people never getting to have the kids they hope to have. But I always felt that advice was coming from a good place, and I'm wondering, how do you determine the motivations of the people offering that kind of advice?
She's gonna say there's no like motivation. It's just they're just acting on, you know, subconscious. It's not a moral, immoral. It's not a I'm trying to do this. It's subconscious. Here we go.
Institutions offering that advice. I know that you think that it's for this, suppression of reproduction, but how can you sort of look within and determine what that motivation is?
So it's a similar question to the point we talked about earlier with the difference between proximate and ultimate explanations. A lot of female intersexual competition is very nasty and very overtly nasty, and women who are very high on intersexual competition also tend to be very high on the dark triad. Those just you just think of them as the nasty personality traits: psychopathy, narcissism, and Machiavellianism, dishonest, manipulative, callous, entitled. And so a lot of intersexual competition is very nasty, and that makes intuitive sense, right? If you're going to engage in the kinds of behaviours that are going to, deliberately disrupt other people's relationships and things like that, obviously, in order to do that, it would help if you're an inherently nasty person. However, if we're going to posit that female manipulative reproductive suppression is becoming widespread, then one of two things has to happen. It either needs to leverage off pro-social motives, because the majority of people have many more pro-social motives than they have anti-social motives. So it either needs to leverage off pro-social motives, or the proportion of anti-social motives in people needs to increase. And I think we're seeing a little bit of both of those. So we know that the left-wing progressive activist type crowd is sort of surprisingly high on the dark triad, and a lot of
the left wing is on the dark triad: Machiavellianism, sociopathy, and narcissism.
The sort of far end reproductive suppression sort of stuff coming out of that end is kind of quite nasty. So I think in some senses we are seeing, a sort of a shift in the social norms where nastiness is becoming more acceptable
nastiness is becoming more acceptable. Oof.
These types of ideas becoming a little bit more mainstream and more acceptable. We're seeing that to some extent, but I think to a much broader extent, if it's going to become a society-wide phenomenon, it has to leverage off pro-social motives. And this is where the advice-giving studies that we gave came in handy, is that you've got women ostensibly giving advice to their friends in these studies about what they think they should do, like focus on your career first, get your career set up, have children later once you're financially...
You can't just have it as an evilness. Oh no, focus on your career. Don't worry about having kids. Have those later. So it's giving advice on a pro-social kind of platform.
Or, blah, blah, blah. But what we find is that when we ask women to say what they would do in those situations, the advice they would give themselves is more pro-reproductive. So we're seeing,
So they give bad information, but they themselves would practice pro-reproduction.
Women encouraging other women to take the less, pro-natal positions, whilst they, for themselves, where they've got the most interests, the most reproductive interest and the most proximal, nice interest in the outcome.
So those of you that believed in having less kids and go get your boss up, girl, get your career, y'all got played.
What they would actually do would be a slightly more reproductively, inclined take. And so we are and then the clincher to that is that when you also measure how intersexually competitive the women are, that difference, what you would tell other women to do versus what you would do yourself, is predicted by how intersexually competitive you report being. So, even though I'm not proposing that women are consciously giving what they think is misleading advice, what I'm suggesting is that women have been selected to give reproductively inhibiting advice
Yes, they're not consciously doing it, but they've been selected to do it.
Other women.
Could that
That's-
be
That's
though?
what they've been for to do.
She's gonna try to make this more appetite arousing or whatever. She doesn't like the sound of that.
Danny, could that be because the risk benefit analysis is easier to make coolly when you're speaking to someone than when your heart is involved in it? I mean, there's that kind of feeling, right? Like I might go for the guy and take the risk, even though he's a broke musician and he works in a pub, and and it doesn't look like a good bet, but I'm in love, so I'm going to go ahead.
No, what you're saying is I'm going to go for the broke musician who's hot. That's the alpha. That's the alpha fucks.
But if my girlfriend said, "Do you think it's a good idea that I'm really kind of in love with him. I think I'm going to quit law school and start dating this broke musician," and
No, this is not what she's saying at all.
girl,
Because that means you're going to alpha fucks them.
just finish law school, date him, but don't jump straight into the thing, that may or may not be autobiographical. So I'm just
Um,
It's very autobiographical.
Well, it's interesting actually because there's a couple of things in there, and one is that we actually kind of did that manipulation. So we did scenarios where the guy was ostensibly like a good bet, and we did scenarios where we described him, again, not meaning anything autobiographical. So we kind of had like the really good prospect, and we had the really poor prospect. And when the guy was the poor prospect, we did see that situation reverse, where women were then less likely to say that they would invest, but they were more likely to advise
interesting.
for advice to invest.
So you should date the broke musician, but
If he's hot enough, that's what you're not adding.
And
I
one
would.
observation I would make is that what people generally consciously are thinking that they're doing, and the sort of rationalizations for their own behavior and decisions that we come up with, doesn't necessarily bear a very strong relationship to the reasons for those decisions. So humans have been everybody's mate choice apparatus has been selected for and refined over many generations by people who successfully reproduced, which is why we're here, right? All the people who failed at that aren't here anymore and didn't leave any progeny. So we have very refined mate selection mechanisms.
Yes, how we select mates is very well refined and not for argument. Go to my Wikipedia video.
So what people would typically do for themselves is the result of mechanisms that have been finely honed, not to always make the right choice, because you can't always make the right choice, but to make the choice that would be the optimum on average. So given the information that you have, this is the best bet of what the right choice would be. And obviously you're going to make the wrong choice fairly frequently because we don't have complete information about the people we're making these choices about, but we have systems that have been designed to make those choices. So when we are advising other people to do something other than what we think we would do ourselves, it's a reasonably safe assumption to think that we're advising to do something suboptimal. And when we're at suboptimality,
Go ahead. I just have one last question because I know we're kind of getting to time. Have you done any kind of studies or comparisons on kind of levels of happiness among these groups? So people that, say, for example, selected for having those families earlier in life with the kids and focusing on that versus the people that waited and that maybe now have some reproductive issues, and maybe they don't have reproductive issues, but they decided to wait and pursue careers, or they pursue careers and now they're having a hard time finding a mate. And I'm asking this because actually this question came up on Solid Ground the other day about happiness and knowing how many people do we know in our lives that are happy, or do we know people that are happy? So I'm interested to know if that was ever tested, that people found
not for me.
happiness or no.
So definitely not by me. I don't have any of my own data that speak to that. But I do know that there has been a number of studies that have attempted to assess happiness of women and happiness of women with children, especially as women get to the kind of late 30s, early 40s, where it sort of if you haven't had children by then, it kind of becomes clear that you're very unlikely to. The happiness of women at that point who don't have children goes down substantially. So it doesn't necessarily appear to, as far as I know, I don't certainly know the data that well. From what I do know, though, there is now increasingly good evidence for a serious decline in happiness and mental well-being of childless women once they hit basically the point at which it becomes clear that they're not going to have children. So younger than that, I don't think that there's much of a difference as far as to the best of my knowledge. But once women effectively kind of, realise either consciously or not or whatever, that they have missed that boat, then there are serious declines in mental well-being of childless women in those age groups, at least. I don't know for how long it lasts for. I don't know if that then becomes a sort of a lifetime lasting effect or if it's more short-lived than that. But as far as I know, that much is becoming quite clear now in the data. So it definitely is having impacts on happiness, but not soon enough to change people's behaviour.
Yeah, okay. Danny, this is so interesting.
All right, they're going to wrap it up, so we'll wrap it up too. As you see, there is a Societal Collapse podcast there, and it's pretty interesting. I like the online dating stuff where that was interesting. But anyway, give it a go, give it a look. Subscribe to the Solid Ground podcast. This is number 138. I'll put I'll copy the podcast and put it in the description. All right, and we'll see you on the next one.